New study shows there are a whole lot of billionaires in San Francisco. Also, Facebook's co-founder wants to see the social media giant broken up, and a judge fast-tracks the congressional subpoena fight over the president's financials. And is it SOX, S-O-X, or SOCKS, S-O-C-K-S? We know, but does the White House?
This Friday, we have Chuck Rocha in the House. I'm sorry, Chuck. Rocha. I know one day I'm going to get it right on the first try. Democratic strategist. And well, sometimes I go Roja, so to really. Yeah. And senior advisor for Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign. He's joined by Mica Mosbacher, whose name is easier to say. She's a Trump 2020 advisory board member and a friend of the show. Both friends of the show, if I may say, as long as he'll still be my friend after I butcher his name every week. Crystal, why don't you start this so I stop talking?
All right, so big op-ed in the New York Times yesterday from Chris Hughes, who was a co-founder of Facebook, calling for that company to be broken up, saying it has gotten too large, too powerful, and pretty bold stance for a guy who got rich off this company to call for them to break up. So what do you think, Mica? I mean, there's a lot of bipartisan concern left and right about the power of Facebook and the power of this one particular individual, Mark Zuckerberg, over our lives, our culture, our politics, our world, etc. So does Chris Hughes have a point here?
He does have a point. I mean, first of all, breaking up is hard to do. So this is going to be a yeoman's task. But if you look at the UK, they've already begun to crack down on regulations regarding Facebook, Google, as well as, WhatsApp. And we could argue in this country that it's inhibiting free speech, but some of that followed the attacks in New Zealand. Remember, in the 2 mosques, and that video went viral. So there are some aspects here where there is concern about hate speech or violent, terrorist acts being, replicated and going viral before Facebook has a chance to censor them. And then secondly, there is a project under Macron in France where they're actually stating that if they won't regulate themselves, that they will embed regulators within the industry. Now, here in the U.S., I know Elizabeth Warren has a new proposal, which is very drastic, but even Congressmen, Republicans like Josh Hawley or even Ted Cruz are calling for some sort of regulation. I mean, after all, the Sherman Act is over 100 years old and then had to do with monopolies. So I think that they do have a point, especially when we look at the fact that some of our data has been compromised as well, and our privacy.
Yeah. Let's take a listen to Chris Hughes making a little bit of the case for himself.
Well, the Facebook that exists today is not the Facebook that we founded in 2004. And the one that we have today, I think, is far too big, it's far too powerful, and most importantly, its CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, is not accountable. I'm angry at Mark, and I'm angry at a lot of Facebook's leadership for taking something that held so much promise and could have been so amazing, and sacrificing quality, security, civility for clicks.
What do you think, Chuck?
Well, I didn't do near the research that my good sister from Texas did, but I want to say for the record that I was way ahead of this guy who helped found it. Years ago, I said we should break this up. Anytime you got some kind of social media tool that my mama's on and my son is on, and they both watch me, then it needs to be broken up. Let me be on the record to say that first and foremost, right? And I think that when you look at the consolidation of power and money, anytime you get this much power and wealth in one place, and I know we're going to talk about a wealth study soon, that it's concerning to people. They should go make all the money they can make, let me be clear, but there's also something around free speech, around the power that you have, and mainly the power of my mama to watch me and my son on there bothers me a lot.
Well, and they own WhatsApp, they own Instagram, they own a number of other very large platforms, and they have no competitor. And this ties in, though, to your point, Chuck, about a broader conversation about monopoly power. I mean, you see a lot of consolidation in the agriculture industry. That's part of why farmers are getting crushed. You see a lot of companies where basically the previous antitrust regime has been really changed and very limited in scope, so government takes a much less activist role in breaking up these large monopolies.
If you think about it from a political perspective, from somebody who buys media and buys digital advertising, they are also an animal in that space. So if you you want to talk to voters, back to whether the Russia stuff on foreign influence, no matter what, if you want to go talk to a bunch of Americans in one place, to my point, my mama's on it and my son is on it, I'm on it. So you can spend dollars there, go a lot further, because you have so many eyeballs looking at that advertisement, no matter what you're advertising for, and they're the behemoth. Like, there's nothing even close to them in Instagram that even revels in that. When you do media advertising, they're 80% of the marketplace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Cambridge Analytica, for example, which did not work. I mean, the Mercers investigated. They were they were investors in Cambridge, and it was utilized during the Ted Cruz campaign, of which I was a national co-chair at one point prior to Trump. We actually, studied, or they studied the habits of, Facebook users, their spending habits, etc. But it actually didn't work because Ted Cruz came in second. And so Brad Parscale, who took over the digital operation for Trump, has said repeatedly publicly that he didn't feel that that particular targeting exactly works. But no doubt Facebook is being utilized by Trump 2020. It's being utilized for other candidates in terms of political advertising.
Hugely. And to your point, Chuck, there's new numbers out about just how wealthy big tech has made so many people. I mean, we tend to think of the traditional sort of money and power center of America being Buck's hometown, New York. But in fact, San Francisco has way more billionaires per capita than any other city in the country. 1 in roughly 11,000 people in San Francisco is a billionaire. These people are incredibly wealthy, and they have a lot of power, and not just in the Republican Party. This is a group that really, I mean, on the cultural issues, they're funding a lot of the Democratic campaigns right now.
It's interesting to see. It's not like the good old days when just a bunch of old white rich men had a lot of stuff and they just handed it down to their kids, and their kids would hand it down to their kids, which was the American way back in the day when we used to talk about old millionaires, right? Now the new millionaires and billionaires are somebody who come up with the widget, and we're all jealous that we didn't come up with that widget, whether it be Facebook or whether it be something else. But I think that it does draw a point. When I was reading this morning, I was thinking about the disparities, that in a capitalist society, you should be able to go make all the money you can make. But what we've done with the capitalism that we've created through this stock market model is we created these really, really rich people. And you've created a lot of really, really poor people, all in the same city as San Francisco, which is a microcosm of the whole country, except they have a lot more billionaires because of Silicon Valley. And there's this working class group of people in the middle who actually Donald Trump got a lot of them to vote for him because they are frustrated. But every politician you're going to see that's running for president, whether it's Donald Trump's re-elect or other, will want to talk to that people in the middle who feel like they've been forgotten. And every time they read a story like this about more billionaires and millionaires, and that's why you see my guy talking about millionaires and billionaires in every stump speech that he gets, because he knows that the American people are tired of seeing more people get rich and more people get really poor.
Yeah.
Well, it is all about the economy, and going into 2020, that is number one issue, followed by healthcare and immigration. But, we have to look at it on the flip side. There are 159 newcomers on the Forbes 400 list, for example, this year. And in 2018, USA Today said that there are billionaires being created every other day. Now, that may be a stretch, but the point is a lot of that does have to do with this economy and the fact that you can realize the American dream. And it is going to be hard to argue that we have a roaring economy with a 3.7 to 8% GDP growth and record unemployment, African Americans, women, etc.
But I think the part that Trump did seize on successfully and speak to that frustration is what Chuck points to, that in the city of San Francisco, with 1 in 11,000 people being a billionaire, and then you have literally stepping over homeless bodies in the street, right? And that is the and you have this economy where you've got a few people that are using all of our data to get really, really rich, right? That's off of our backs. They're selling our stuff to make that money. And meanwhile, and then the other part of the economy is the people that serve them their sustainable sushi at 2 a.m. or whatever.
Right, and delicious.
Exactly. At the same time that this is, at the same time that that's happening, though.
Yeah.
In my hometown of Tyler, Texas, 18 years ago, there was a tire factory that employed 1,500 men and women, including my father, 6 of his brothers, and 12 of my cousins. Like, it was a roaring part of the Tyler economy.
Right.
That tire factory now sits in China because we made small passenger tires for cars, and they can import those cheaper than American workers could make them, even though we made a profit for Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. So you had a whole industry and a whole small community that were devastated by our failed trade policies.
Yep.
Still, while all these other people are getting wealthy, but the key to this is the American people feel like the system is rigged for rich people. If you have a small business like I do, and you pay a personal income tax based off of your individual rate, and maybe you make $100,000, $200,000, which is an incredible amount of money for most people, you're paying way more taxes than all of these rich people are paying.
Right.
That's the thing that really makes people upset.
Well, you're paying more taxes on income as opposed to capital gains, right? I mean, this
Because I have nothing to have capital gains on.
Right.
Because I'm an
Just your
individual
labor.
trying to make
No,
it.
I understand.
Exactly.
I'm clarifying or adding to the point you make. I mean, I think it's a fair point to say there are some things where you have a real fight that shouldn't be a fight, like the carried interest loophole, for example, for hedge fund managers. That's just a straight up giveaway. And I'm actually a capitalist, so.
Did Trump say he was going to close that?
He did. And he did not.
Anyway, what else is going on?
Well, I was just going to say that tire factory is no longer going to sit in China after the tariffs that were slapped on China.
There we
today.
go.
We'll see about that.
Mika.
Okay.
I like it. Mika. There we go. The subpoena fight. This is going on right now. You've got a judge that's fast tracking all these different subpoenas that are flying all over the place. District Judge Amit Mehta said he's going to decide the full case after a hearing on Tuesday. So there are subpoenas flying around. The Financial Services and Intelligence Committees have stuff they're looking for from Deutsche Bank, Capital One. They're looking into Ivanka Trump, looking into Donald Trump Jr. Mika, they're basically going to use the Congress to investigate the entirety of President Trump's family, which at some point this may look like it's just too vindictive and will backfire. I don't know when Democrats feel like we're there or if they ever think we'll be there, but I think we're already there.
I think Americans have chronic investigative fatigue syndrome. I mean, enough is enough. The Mueller report, we're beating a dead horse.
Did you feel that way during all the Benghazi investigations?
Take my talking points. Go ahead.
Sorry.
And we have impeachment fantasy, Nadler's in search of Neverland. It really, I think American people care about kitchen table issues, such as what you were talking about, your tire factory that went out of business in Tyler. They care about bread and butter issues, and I think they want to see Congress come together. I think bipartisan legislation right now will be as tough as putting socks on a rooster. However,
Can I borrow that? I like that. That's one of these Texas things that they
invite
say.
them on to
Yeah,
get good,
just
like,
tell us stuff.
Texas stuff. But Chuck, I mean, what is significant here is that there's been this question. Yes, there are all these subpoenas. This one has to do specifically with Trump's financial records, something Democrats and much of the country have been very interested in seeing. And there's been a question around, okay, well, if they fight these in court, it's just going to drag out and we're not going to get anywhere before the election. Well, this judge at least is saying, I'm taking this up next week.
Right, and I think moving it along is an interesting thing, and I think that it's probably the right thing from my perspective, but I want to make a point about the investigations and about where the American people are, because I don't think any of us really know where they are. We think we know. I want to think that they're with me. She wants to think they're with the Republicans. Like, we will see who's right, but what I do know is that I've done campaigns for 29 years, going back to Ann Richards in 1990. So I have done this a little bit, right? And I am wrong a lot, and I'm a horrible consultant because I'll admit that I was wrong. But what I do know is in the last election, which was less than a year ago, that we ran demonizing Donald Trump and the Republicans, and we picked up 30 congressional seats and held our own in the Senate. Even though they kept control of the Senate, it was a bad map. But you can see the trend trajectories.
But was that because of the demonization of Trump, or was that because of health care in the states where the Democrats were able to
It's a great point, Buck. Like, I think it's both, right? I think in different geographical regions, because there are regions where the Republicans overperform the Democrats in certain regions of the country. How that overlays with a presidential map will determine which one of us are actually right. Because I think that there could be people that are fatigued by that. But I really think that there are more Republicans. There are people that are rabid about this, and I think they're left-wing ideologues like me, crazy liberals. It's that sweet spot in the middle of those folks who really think there's something going to come out of this investigation that could be a dagger, or is it just more waste of taxpayer dollars? That will be the big unknown.
yeah, especially with the Rust Belt states.
Yeah.
I like to call it the industrial heartland, but I agree.
Chuck, don't you
Yes.
think there's also going to be a shift in sort of focus and attention when you have a Democratic nominee and that person is sort of driving the conversation? Because what we've seen, I mean, right now, we have a new House majority, they're doing their thing, that gets a lot of attention and energy, and then you've got the horse race over here of what are these people doing, but you don't have one standard bearer really for the Democratic Party. I mean, does that shift the dynamic too?
I think it goes to Buck's point. Do you spend all your time hammering on the president, whatever comes out of this report, if something negative, do you hammer on that? The real question, what we find with moderates in the middle, is can you talk about a set of policies that differentiate you against the other person, whether it's a male or a female, along with this corrupt system piece of it that all Americans, Democrat or Republicans, are really fed up with, of thinking that the system is rigged. And Donald Trump was masterful at capitalizing on that last time. Can the Democrats steal some of that narrative and then draw a policy contrast based off of what he done that Republicans will think is right, Democrats will think is wrong, but will the people in the middle believe that will be who wins that election?
Yeah. Either of you sports fans or not?
You know I am.
I'm a huge sports fan,
okay,
and there were more horses running. There are more horses in the Democratic race than ran in the Kentucky Derby.
There you go.
So wouldn't it be interesting?
Which one is more politically correct, though? That's the question. Okay, well, this is just stupid, but the White House apparently managed to misspell Boston Red Sox. Even I know that it's S-O-X. They spelled it S-O-C-K-S. That's not the right way to do it. And then they congratulated them for winning the World Cup series.
You know, there's some 20-year-old intern.
Downright un-American, Buck Sexton.
Yeah, there's a 20-year-old intern who feels very sad about this right now and is, drinking somewhere in Georgetown, although it's a little early. Mica.
Never too early to drink in Georgetown.
I think Don't You Love autocorrect? That's what I think could have happened with the website.
But what about the World Cup, Mica? Come on. How are you going to explain that one away?
Look, I make mail for a living. I make billboards for a living. I make bumper stickers for a living. This is something that happens. It is horrible for somebody who's doing it. Do you have a horror story
of where this happened to you? Has this happened to you?
I had a piece of mail that almost went to print with a senator from North Carolina's last name spelt wrong.
Oh, that's bad.
Never went to the mailboxes. We called it and copied it very, very late, but it happens all the time. It happened to me yesterday with a billboard that somebody caught before. We never went to print with it, but it was a rough draft that one junior staffer had made that spelt Medicare wrong. And you may notice in business I work in candidates I work for, Medicare is a really important word to spell right.
How did they spell it?
It was
I or something?
It was medical instead of Medicare. Right? And it was a junior staffer, to your point, who slapped together a billboard for somebody to look at, just as a rough draft. It had never been printed or went anywhere. And it makes you really feel embarrassed when the principal's like, I think it's Medicare for all.
Not medical for all.
Well, how about when you text a friend? I mean, there is one funny text that went viral, and apparently the person said, I'm buying a Prius, and it came out as a part of the male anatomy.
But I will tell you, it is the best.
To someone they worked with.
I'm scandalized right now. What is going on here?
It's Friday.
Crystal,
it's the greatest learning experience for a young staffer in the world of learning. Like I've even done it when I was younger, but it makes me go back and double proof everything all the time because it happens to all of us. Anybody who does this.
Should I tell my dirty misspelling joke? Because it's Friday. Mica laid the groundwork. Back when I was on MSNBC, Steve Kornacki briefly would do this game show thing called Up Against the Clock.
Oh, yeah.
One time they left out the L. I'll just leave it at that.
Wow. Got some ratings.
Here we go.
All right, panel. You're so fun. This is like the longest panel that I think we've done all week.
We just wanted to keep hanging out with you guys.
Yeah. Next time.
It's because we both talk funny.
Happy Mother's Day.
We do talk funny.
A spelling error,
Another
printed
one.
money,
Another
and
spelling
the
error.
billion-dollar mistake. We're really laughing at people today.
You are never too old for an adventure, and the latest trendy fashion choice has legs and some pretty sharp teeth. So we're going to explain that before we go to.